What up? The Midnight launch is a few weeks away, and that means it's time to start thinking about what class you should play to start the expansion. So we're going to talk about all 6 tanks, what they've got going on, and rank them all based on how strong and how fun we think they are. Before we jump into it, help us out with that YouTube busy work. Like, subscribe, and hype the video if you're on mobile. These all tell YouTube to show our content to more people, which helps us keep doing this. Alright, so let's start with the standard disclaimer here. This is our opinion from testing tanks on the beta and playing them right now in the pre-patch. We're basing this on how good we think they're all going to be right at the start of the expansion, up through the beginning of Season 1, and putting extra emphasis on trying to clear Mythic Plus with random groups. That is the way that most people play and do Mythic Plus. Your priorities are going to be very different if you're in an organized group that's coordinating on Discord. We're emphasizing being able to carry Pug DPS, and also just trying to make it easier to get accepted into random groups, too. Also, the game is still not out. Blizzard can make changes. They literally are making some changes right now as we're recording. The live servers are down, and they're rolling out kind of a big patch that we'll talk about in just a second here, but there's other stuff that could happen in the future. The community could have missed something. Our opinions could change. All the usual stuff when you're talking about content that isn't live yet. And so on that note, today's patch notes are out. They are working on putting this on the servers right now, and not to go super in depth, but basically there are some buffs to some underperformers and some small nerfs to some overperformers, so let's just kind of touch on some of the basics here. Blood Decay, their damage is absolutely wretched, and they're getting a decent size buff. You know, if this buff was like twice this size, Blood Decay would probably be very competitive. Unfortunately, it's the size that it is, so it's probably going to bring them from way last place up to like last place. Demon Hunter's getting some small, sort of just like deck chair shuffling. They're losing some baseline stamina and some shielding from Soul Barrier when they use Spirit Bomb, but then they're getting more like shielding out of using fire damage, so kind of just shifting some power around. Bear Druid is getting a lot of defensive and offensive value added. Like, they're getting more armor, they're getting more damage, and then they're losing some healing per Frenzied Regen, but they're going back to the shorter Frenzied Regen cooldown, which always felt better. It's been a really long time since Frenzied Regen's cooldown was under 30 seconds baseline, and that feels great. Like, this is a really good change, but then they are nerfing some of the other stuff that's really good, right? Like, the Absorb Shield from Ursox Fury is getting bumped from 40% down to 30. So kind of some moving stuff around on another underperformer. Mostly this is damage buffs to a class that wasn't really doing very good damage, so that is good. The big one really though is that Brewmaster and especially Master of Harmony are getting some pretty substantial damage buffs. Brewmaster's damage wasn't bad, and it wasn't looking bad going into the next expansion, so this is really good stuff. This is sort of like, giving more money to the rich, kind of what's happening here. Brewmaster is looking like they're going to be in great shape because of this. And then finally, there are like some very small changes to Prot Paladin, kind of a nerf to their execute damage, which is already whatever, and Warrior is also having their execute damage and shield slam damage reduced. Warrior's execute damage by comparison is horrible. Nothing too super huge for Warrior. The change to Indomitable does make it like quite a lot more usable now though. 10% increased max health, healing for 1% of your health every 15 rage is pretty great. Alright, so with that being said, let's go ahead and kind of go class by class, and we'll start alphabetically with Blood Decay, and just talk a little bit about the class. So, to do the selling points, it has really good self-healing thanks to Death Strike. It has Grips and Gorfine's Grasp, or A-Bomb Limb, but it has some AoE grip utility. It has a ranged interrupt, which is great. And that's about the end of the positives and selling points for Blood Decay, unfortunately. The damage is weak, the cooldown toolkit has been absolutely gutted, Dancing Rune Weapon uptime was absolutely slashed going into this expansion, A-Bomb Limb no longer deals damage or generates any resources. There's a lot of reduction in the amount of resources that Blood Decay is able to generate by default. They really just simplified the class, which is good for new players, but for experienced players and for people wanting to push higher level content, it's kind of boring and disappointing. Blood Decay just feels a lot weaker than it used to, and there's a lot less to do on it. Alright, now let's talk about the Apex talent for Blood Decay, and Apex talents are going to be a system for all of the tanks, all of the specs in the game. They're kind of the big new thing that's being added in Midnight for every single spec. The Apex talent for Blood Decay is Dance of Midnight, and the way it works is it grants some extra bonuses while Dancing Rune Weapon is active. It gives some occasional Dancing Rune Weapon procs, and that's kind of it. It's not bad, but it's not great. The ultimate verdict here is that the rotation is simple, the class doesn't feel very strong, the damage has been buffed, as of literally today, but it still isn't good. It was a medium-sized buff to a full-sized chump. The self-healing is good, the grips are good, and that's basically all Blood DK has. So because of all of that, we're going to put DK in C tier. We do not recommend playing Blood DK. You're going to have a tougher time finding groups, you're going to have a tougher time staying alive and having success in those groups. So for those reasons, DK goes on our do not recommend list. It's the only tank that's going to fall into that category. Okay, now let's move on to Vengeance Demon Hunter. So there were a lot of changes to Vengeance Demon Hunter. There were a lot of inconsistent ramping defensive bonuses that used to exist in the talent tree in the past, things like calcified spikes or frailty. These have all been made super consistent now. They no longer ramp up and down at all. This was arguably a big buff to Demon Hunter's overall ability to stay alive, which was already fantastic. Again, the rich get richer. Spirit Bomb is now a minor offensive cooldown, totally distinct from Soul Cleave. You will use both of the two of them in conjunction with each other, and it feels pretty good, actually. It's also super easy to maintain Demon Spikes. The Sigil playstyle is mostly dead, but the Fiery Brand build is back on the menu, boys. Maybe the one big change that we don't really love is that Feldev no longer grants Metamorphosis at all. Weirdly, this is the one tank that doesn't feel like it was stripped down in any meaningful way. It actually feels like it has more keybinds to use than it did in the War Within when it was already a pretty keybind-heavy spec. The apex talent for Vengeance Demon Hunter is Untethered Rage. It grants a chance to let you cast Metamorphosis for 10 seconds with no cooldown and then some basic damage and agility buffs. It's a little annoying to use. You have to manually cast Metamorphosis, it isn't just a randomly occurring buff, but the buff for that only lasts for 10 seconds, so you pretty much have to use it just about immediately, and it's just not super interesting. But like with the Blood DK bonus, it's free damage, it's a free cooldown. That is a good thing. It does seem like it replaced the Metamorphosis buff that came from using Feldev though, so don't really love that. The ultimate verdict on Vengeance Demon Hunter is that the self-healing is great, the damage is okay, and the group utility is as awesome as ever. You have Silence, you have Sigil of Chains potentially, you have a lot of CC, and it's just very, very hard to die on a Vengeance Demon Hunter. Because of all of this, Vengeance Demon Hunter really deserves to go in the S tier. You cannot go wrong with playing Vengeance Demon Hunter. Alright, now let's move along alphabetically to Bear Druid. So there was a big shuffle in the talent tree for Bear Druid, but the general idea of the class is still mostly the same as it was in the War Within. They have lost Rage of the Sleeper and Thorns of Iron, which doesn't feel great, but most of the other changes have felt pretty much fine. You have a pretty limited number of skills in Bear form, and that's okay. The toolkit is still very effective. You're able to convert damage into self-shielding with Thrash, or into self-healing with Moonfire, so that still keeps you pretty tanky along with Iron Fur. You still get cooldown reduction on Incarnation by spending Rage, so the main hook of Bear Druid is still completely intact. The apex talent for Bear Druid is Wild Guardian. It's pretty janky to use. You have to use Incarnation, then press it again to give yourself the Wild Guardian buff, and then it will buff your next two Iron Fur, Maul, or Frenzied Regen cast. It does all three of them. They're not like mutually exclusive. So you get a bit of extra damage, you get a bit of extra defense. That's cool. The subsequent bonuses just kind of give you that like extra damage bonus out of Maul all the time, which is cool. And then the final point just makes it like stronger than it was. So fine, nothing super duper interesting. The fact that it's like extra cooldown on top of a cooldown is maybe good for doing really huge pulls in more coordinated Mythic Plus, but in the terms of just like the standard rotation, it doesn't really do a lot. The main thing that this does is it does really emphasize a much more Maul-oriented playstyle, which leans way heavier toward playing Druid of the Claw. So if you liked Druid of the Claw before and wanted to play it in Mythic Plus, that's great. If you prefer to Loon's Chosen, too bad. The verdict for Bear Druid is that it's still very simple. There's much more of a shift toward physical damage, Thrash, Mangle, and Maul being kind of your main skills. There's just not really a ton going on rotationally or mechanically. You could say maybe that's like a good beginner tank, but then it has a lot of weird extra group utility you can use like Innervate and Dream of Cenarius that isn't really beginner friendly at all. It's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none tank, but the round of buffs today have put it in a much better spot than it was before. So previously we had said Bear Druid was probably a B, B+. It's definitely an A level tank now. It's a considerable step up from where Blood DK is, and it is also still a step back from the like true cream of the crop. Alright, now let's talk about Brewmaster Monk. So the main change to Brewmaster Monk is that Rising Sun Kick was completely removed and its damage was folded into Tiger Palm and the rest of your kit. Weapons of Order is also gone. All the talents that worked with it have basically just been made to work with Invoke Nizao instead. Two things that Brewmasters really needed for a long time and finally gotten in Midnight are Vital Flame, which heals you for 50% of all the fire or nature damage you deal, so just being able to do damage and convert that directly into healing. This has been a huge weakness in Brewmaster's toolkit for a long time, and they finally fixed that. And then the other thing is just more offensive value on Exploding Keg. There are multiple talents now that synergize nicely with Exploding Keg to turn it into a real burst damage cooldown. The rotation just feels a lot more fun and snappy without Rising Sun Kick clogging things up. Brewmaster Monk's Apex talent, Bring Me Another, is a random proc when you drink a brew that grants an extra damage proc on your next Keg Smash. The follow-up talents to that grant cooldown resets on Keg Smash that make it also cost no energy, and the final talent gives you a guaranteed proc and a heal for your allies whenever you use Fortifying Brew or Celestial Infusion. This is an amazingly good Apex talent. It is by far the best of the 6 tanks. It's not even close. It might be the best in the whole game. It's definitely the best of the tanks, though. Blizzard really crushed it with this one. So the verdict on Brewmaster Monk is that it's extremely strong, it has great damage, it's very tanky, it has pretty decent group utility between Leg Sweep, Ring of Peace, and Paralysis. You are able to CC enemies like crazy. The extra group healing is just a nice bit of frosting on top of the cupcake. So all of this is to say that Brewmaster Monk is fun to play again. They did it. Brewmaster Monk rules. It is definitely an S tier tank. Right now it is being considered the go-to tank among high-level players and coordinated groups, and that is maybe the one weakness that Brewmaster has. It is not able to put caster mobs into interrupt jail. It doesn't have battle res or grip or any of those like unique group utilities. It is very strong, very tanky. It's going to be great in organized groups, and slightly weaker in random groups because it can't lock down caster mobs. So it's an S tier tank, but it's gonna be pretty competitive with Vengeance Demon Hunter at the start of the coming expansion for playing with pure pugs. With that being said, it's probably gonna be more fun to play, so we're maybe gonna put it ahead of Vengeance Demon Hunter, even though that's a little questionable. So Protection Paladin is up next, and it's undergone a handful of pretty significant changes. Eye of Tyr has been completely removed from the game, which is unfortunate. Hammer of Wrath is no longer a separate skill for Paladins at all. It's just a passive damage bonus to Judgment when enemies are below 20% health, and that did get nerfed a good bit today as well. Righteous Protector now makes your wings last for 12 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown, and there is no other cooldown reduction for wings available at all. It's weird, but it kind of feels good, actually. And now you can also spec into Judgment hitting 2 additional targets for 80% damage, which feels great. Most conspicuously, Blizzard hasn't nerfed Adventure Shield or Divine Toll at all, so Paladin still carries interrupts like no other tank can even dream of doing. The Apex talent for Protection Paladin is Glory of the Vanguard. It's a little complicated, not quite as much going on here as Brewmaster Monk, but definitely more than any of the other 4 remaining tanks. Basically, it grants a bunch of extra damage and holy power as occasional procs from your Judgment, and when your wings are active, the proc chance becomes 100%. You also, like I said, you get 3 holy power every time that proc occurs, so this is going to work really well for Templar being able to rain down a ton of Empyrean hammers. So this is awesome for burst damage, and that's really the whole through line for Protection Paladin in Midnight. They deal a lot of burst damage. So let's talk about putting them on the list here. We were a little wary of Paladin in the early phases of the beta, but it's actually come together really well toward the end. Even with some nerfs happening today, it still feels like an S tier tank. The group utility is just too good. You have Sacrifice, you have Freedom, whatever. Those are like the lowest levels of group utility. You have insane amounts of interrupts with Avenger Shield. You have Blessing of Protection and Spell Warding and Divine Shield. You have all of that incredible cooldown utility and group utility, and the ability to put casters into Interrupt Prison forever is just impossible to replace. But also the damage is amazing. The group utility, is also great, but the one downside of Paladin is that it's not the tankiest tank, and that's why it's not just at the top of the pack. But for playing with pugs, playing with less organized groups, it is so hard to outclass a Paladin. Alright, now let's talk about Protection Warrior. They got the least amount of changes of any tank. That's kind of because they got a big redesign in the final patch of the War Within. So one of the things that Protection Warrior got was a bunch of Execute talents, and Execute is a fun idea to build around, but unfortunately the base skill damage just isn't very good right now, and it's getting nerfed today for some reason, so that all feels not very good. Thunderous Roar was removed, but you can still use Champion Spear or spec into defensive bonuses instead. There have been some small buffs to shouts, including Piercing Howl, granting a small group move speed buff on a 30-second cooldown. If you remember to use it, that's cool. Otherwise, there's nothing really all that huge. Warrior's still basically the same class as always. Shield Slam, Thunderclap, Avatar, Shield Block, Spell Reflection. You know it, you love it, it's fun. Now let's get to the bad part. The Apex talent for Protection Warrior is terrible. Phalanx, the first point gives you a shockwave. After you thunderclap, your next shield slam will do a shockwave, does some damage, gives you some damage reduction. Pretty basic. The follow-up points just give you a little bit of extra thunderclap and phalanx damage. And the final point gives you a 10% damage increase while shield block is active, 20% chance to crit. So basically, this is the worst and weakest and least interesting bonus of any of the 6 tanks. Druid's bonus is not great, this is definitely worse. This has been so bad to the point that during a lot of testing, many warrior players are just straight up not using the final 3 points. They're just taking those 3 points and putting them elsewhere in the tree, which is not a great sign for the Apex talent design. Basically, Prop Warrior just doesn't really get an Apex talent after that first point, which is super disappointing. So because of that, Prop Warrior is definitely a step down from the cream of the crop. It's still pretty consistently good. If it gets a real Apex talent redesign, maybe in patch 12.1 or something, 12.0.5, it could be jumping back up into the mix. But as it currently stands, with it getting some kind of weird damage reshuffling and really being just kind of middle of the road, it's very tanky, it has pretty limited group utility, and it has okay damage. That puts it right around the state of Bear Druid. It's not anything super special. It's good, it's definitely not bad, it just doesn't have anything new or interesting going on in the coming expansion. It's still fun, still good, but the lack of a real Apex talent is just such a miss on Blizzard's part. Alright, so let's wrap things up. You really can't go wrong with any of these 3 tanks that are up in the S tier rank. Monk, Demon Hunter, and Paladin. They're all great. If we had to guess, Monk and Demon Hunter are going to be the top 2 most popular, primarily because of high-level coordinated groups, people doing MDI. For just doing pug groups, Prop Paladin really stands above the other 2. It's just so much better at providing utility when you need it most. Also, at least in our experience, it's the most fun, it's the one I have the most fun playing, it's the one that Sunset enjoys playing with the most, so for our purposes, if you want us to just say a class to recommend, Paladin is it. The other 2 are great, they'll work better in coordinated groups, high-level pushing because they are tankier, but for just having a good time in random pug groups, Paladin is the best. Ultimately, we're going to have a couple of weeks at the start of the expansion before the first season begins, so there's going to be time to adjust, but Monk and Paladin are feeling like the most fun options to us right now. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Hopefully this helped you narrow down what you're going to play in the coming expansion. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more WoW content, consider becoming a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.